the University of Johannesburg, the future reimagined.
Good afternoon, colleagues. In the midst of all these load shedding and potential other levels that are going, as we were chatting before you joined in, we're all just saying we just have to be positive. Welcome to another one of the brown bag sessions, that is organized by the University of Johannesburg for the Future Professors Program Phase 2. I am delighted to welcome my very good friend and colleague, Professor Stella Nkomo, who is a professor in the Department of Human Resource Management, and she was former dean, deputy dean for research and postgraduate studies at the University of Pretoria. She holds a PhD in human resource management from UMass, as we often call it, the University of Massachusetts in the United States. Her current research focuses on diversity and race and gender in organizations. She is the co-author of a critically acclaimed international book titled Our Separate Ways, Black and White Women and the Struggle for Professional Identity, which was published by the Harvard Business Review Press. Her research has been published in numerous management journals and edited volumes. Professor Nkomo is currently an associate editor for Equality, Diversity, and Inclusion, an international journal, and she is also a senior editor for diversity entries in the Oxford Research Encyclopedia of Business and Management. She has received numerous awards for her scholarly contributions, including the Sage Scholarly Contribution Award in the Academy of Management for her research on gender and diversity in organizations. The Distinguished Women Scholar in Social Sciences was awarded to her by the Department of Science and Technology then, which is now our Department of Science and Innovation. She is an A-rated researcher, and she is a founding president of the African Academy of Management. She is currently a board member of the Academy of Sciences of South Africa, ASAP, and the Board of Governors at Rhodes University, and the Female Academic Leadership Fellowship Fund. Who better to have a conversation with us this afternoon about the NRF rating and our experiences and perhaps some insights in terms of her own progressions and the work that she has done. I recall in many instances, of course, serving on committees and not only as getting our own rating, but also serving as a very prominent committee member. So without further ado, let me then ask Professor Nkomo to make a presentation. As usual, I would request that if there are comments, you can add comments as we go, but if you can hold back in terms of questions, when she finishes, then we'll have a Q&A, and then people can ask questions and we can get involved in the conversation. Please, if you can mute your microphones for now until we get to the Q&A. Professor Nkomo, over to you. I'll switch off my camera.
Thank you, Prof. Kaneki, and it's so nice to be with everyone today. I'm sorry the last session had to be canceled, but we're here today, and we will try to have a good conversation about the NRF rating and why you should do it, and to share my insights. I just wanted to check something. I see we're scheduled for a 2-hour slot. Is that correct? Can somebody just tell me? Is that correct? We have 2 hours, right? Nobody's answering. Okay, so what I thought I would do, I may stop at certain points because I think what I find sometimes is people have questions and then waiting till the end, then we don't get all the questions done. So I'm going to share my presentation that will tell you what I plan to do. And that way we would be able to see where things fit in. Okay, so what I plan to cover in this workshop is, for example, why apply for an NRF rating? Why should you apply? To give you an overview of the NRF rating system, I don't know how familiar everyone would be with the system, but just to highlight how the system works, to talk about the documentation that you have to prepare as an applicant. There is a lot of documentation. And I'm going to particularly focus on the essays that you have to write that is part of the application. And then give you some tips for submitting a strong application. And I do that from 3 perspectives. I do that from a perspective of being an applicant myself, because when I came to South Africa in 2000, I was not familiar with the national rating system because we did not have such a system in the US. So I had to learn what the system was about. So I will give you my perspective about, from that perspective. The other perspective would be from being a chairperson of a specialist committee in economic and management sciences. And currently, I am a member of the appeals committee of the NRF rating. And I probably have another lens that I bring. I was Deputy Dean for Research and Postgraduate Studies in the Faculty of Economic and Management Sciences at UP. And in that role, I helped a number of colleagues to prepare their applications. And I just want to say that please ask questions you need answers to, meaning don't hold back. No question is naive. It's important that you understand the process and also any particular questions you might have about your own situation. So that's what I'm going to cover. And I may stop at different points to see if there are any questions pertinent to that particular segment. So why should you apply for an NRF rating? That was a question I often got from the faculty when I was Deputy Dean. And that's the question I asked myself, because when I came to South Africa, my colleagues at UNISA said, you need to apply for an NRF rating. And I thought, well, I don't need to do that because I'm already a professor and I'm not sure about it. So I think there are several reasons why it's a good idea to apply for an NRF rating. First of all, it strengthens job applications. To the extent that you have an NRF rating, where peer reviewers have looked at your research and have concluded that you are an established researcher or an international researcher or a leading researcher, that will help to strengthen any application that you make for a university position, particularly in South Africa. Also for promotion. If you're moving from senior lecturer to associate professor, or even to professor, the selection panel, the promotion panel, wants to know what is the quality of your researcher, your research. Is this person an established researcher? And by having already your NRF rating, that question is answered. I've sat on senior appointments committees, and when we get an application where the person has a rating, there is much less questioning of whether or not the person has met the research standard. So that gives you an external endorsement that can supplement your application for promotion. Also, having an NRF rating allows you to access funding within the NRF system. But I think for me, the two that were most attractive in hindsight is the personal satisfaction. The personal satisfaction. You know, we don't often get a chance to sit down and write up on paper, as an academic, as a scholar, what have I done? What have I produced as a researcher? So there was a lot of personal satisfaction when I sat down to start preparing the application to say, wow, I didn't realize cumulatively all that I had done. It also gives you a chance to self-reflect. Have I grown as a researcher? What is the quality of my work? And lastly, acknowledgement by your peers. Because the NRF system is a peer review system. And to get feedback from international and national peers about their perspective of your research is a very high level quality of feedback. And so when you're successful, in particularly, it says your peers recognize the contributions you have made to research in your field. But I want to stress, applying is a voluntary decision. And so I hope that you see these particular items as motivators, because I can say to you, the NRF rating has benefited my career, particularly getting access to funding, but also just using that to help other people with their research. The NRF rating system, I don't know how familiar you are with the system, but the system has been around since 1984. And this is important. And this is very important to understand. The system is about the quality and impact of your research. It's not about your teaching. That's very important because people are not asked to evaluate your teaching or what you have contributed to teaching. So the application focuses on your research output. The second key dimension is trying to assess your relative standing to peers in your discipline. Okay, that can be national. If you're an early career academic, the peers would primarily be the national community of scholars. If you are going for a B or A rating, then of course the international assessment. How do you stand relative to your peers globally? And also the NRF takes into consideration your bibliometric standing, with your H-index, with your Google index. So you can see it's really about your research and where you stand in the field. The time frame, maybe you know this, once you get a rating, the rating is valid for 6 years. And you can reapply. So you reapply in the 5th year so that you have a continuous rating. And what reviewers are asked to assess on your application is the research you have produced in the past 8 years. So it takes an 8-year framework to get a sense of what have you produced. Now, this is something I didn't know because I remember there was a lot of information or chit chat that, you know, the NRF system is not fair. It's not objective. This is when before I did my first application. Oh, you're not going to get fairly evaluated. It was only once I became involved in the specialist committees that I gained a real appreciation for the rigor of the system. Why? Because it's not a single person who rates you. It is multiple looks, multiple examinations of your research. So there's lots of role players. So of course, you're the applicant. As the applicant, you'll see later on, as the applicant, you present yourself, your research through the application process. So it is you who has control over presenting yourself and what you've achieved. Then you have the designated authorities at your organization. So for example, at UJ, UJ will do some screening. If you apply for NRF, I'm pretty sure UJ has this. We had it at UP. What we do at UP, applicants indicate to the dean, I'm thinking about applying. We have a committee. We look at your current research and we kind of say, wait, maybe you should wait. Maybe you should go forward. We have internal processes where we will review your application for you. That's one of the things I did as Deputy Dean for Research and Postgraduate Studies. I reviewed every application, every NRF application to help the person put together the very best application. Then the NRF staff, of course, there's a whole unit at the NRF. I don't know if it's still called monitoring evaluation. So there's a whole internal staff at the NRF that manages this process. It's a huge process. Currently, there's 4,000 rated researchers. So there's a whole system behind this NRF rating. Then you have your specialist committees. The specialist committees are the committees comprised of people in your discipline who actually lead the process for all of the applications in that discipline. So for example, I was the chair and also a member of this specialist committee for economic and management sciences. So you'll have one for history, one for chemistry. So it's discipline based. Then you have your reviewers. Each application must get at least 6 reviews. And then you have assessors. Ooh, assessors. When I even say the word assessors, I kind of get this feeling in my stomach. Assessors are the people who monitor the quality of the work of the specialist committees. I'll explain that. So the assessors monitor the quality of the work of the specialist committees. And then you have the chairpersons who actually chair the review session. I think the point I'm trying to make, and then you have a higher level committees, executive evaluation committee, appeals committee. I'll show you a diagram. But what I'm trying to say to people who say the system is biased and you'll never get a fair assessment, there's many role players, so no single individual can decide your rating. And I think this is very important for people to understand. No system is perfect, but I can tell you that with so many eyes, so many people, that the process is fair and thorough. Now, the rating categories. So based on this, the rating categories that you can get go from A, B, C. This is for people who are 40 and up, who've had their degrees at least 5 years or more. A, of course, is the pinnacle. And what I want to stress there, I've just given you some basic definitions. We can talk about them. But when you get an A rating, that means that the reviewers unequivocally recognize that you are a leading international scholar in your field. And the word there is leading. A B-rated researcher has considerable international recognition, but not identified as necessarily a leader. I know these are subtle distinctions. And C is where most people enter. C is what I would call for people 40 and above or 5 years or more of their PhD. C would be what I call the entry rating, depending on where you are, the kind of work you're doing. But if you get a C rating, it means that your peers have agreed that you are an established researcher, you have a sustained recent record of productivity, the body of work is of good quality, there's coherence in that body of work, and that's very important. So the words I put in red, and you can have a copy of this presentation, are the key words. There must be a theme, there must be coherence in the research output, and you have demonstrated the ability to conceptualize problems and apply methods to investigating them, in the sense of using appropriate methodologies for problems that are well conceptualized, and the body of work you have produced is coherent, and you have been productive over the 8 years. And then there's 2 categories for young researchers, the P and the Y. And the difference between a P and a Y is that the P, if you get a P rating, it means the reviewers, even though you're early in your career, your peer reviewers see the work you're doing as having high potential, exceptionally high potential for you by the time the next rating comes up, period, that by that time you will probably qualify as a B researcher. A Y researcher is more of an indication this person is a young researcher. They have high potential to establish themselves in the next 5-year period. So you might expect a productive Y researcher to, in the 5 years after the initial Y rating, to then produce work where they would be rated as a C1, C2. But this is really dictated by age and how long you've had your degrees. We can talk more about the ratings later on, but those are the categories. When I first came to South Africa, I think I got a B3 rating. Yeah, I got a B3 rating on my first application. So this is how the process works. So you prepare an application of your scholarly achievements. That application will go through probably some internal processing at the universities. Normally, the application calls are open in September. So in September, you can start actually working on the application, but I'll talk more about that. The closing date for applications would be February of the coming year. But normally there is internal processes and deadlines. If you get recommended from the university to go forward, the application goes to the specialist committee, the specialist review committee in your discipline. We can look at those applications, and if we see the chairperson with the specialist committee, we can look at those applications and make recommendations. We might suggest that you wait, but it's only a suggestion. Nobody can tell you not to apply. Also, if there are problems, we try to flag to people. You know, I think when I was chairing, we had a couple of applications where there were many predatory journals. And so the advice there was for the person not to continue. Now, the specialist committee then has the work of selecting 6 peer reviewers. 6 peer reviewers. So each applicant has to have 6 peer reviews that will be used for the assessment. And so we go through and we look at the reviewers that you have nominated. I'll say more about this. But in the end, we must identify and end up with at least 6 peer reviewers. Then we wait for the reviewer reports to come in. When they come in, we read them, we evaluate them, and then there is a meeting, normally in person. With COVID, they were virtual. So at that meeting, you have a specialist committee, the specialist committee members, the assessor, who is an independent. The assessor has independently read the reviewers' reports and done their own ratings. The specialist committee has met and done their own ratings. And there should be a chairperson, and somebody will chair that meeting. The chair will be a person outside of that discipline, and there's a joint meeting. Okay. And after the joint meeting, if the joint meeting is facilitated by a chairperson, as I said, if everyone agrees, there's consensus on whether the person gets a B, C, or Y, then the applicant is informed. If the applicant doesn't like it or like the rating, they can appeal. If there's no consensus, if this joint meeting cannot reach a consensus, then it will go to the Executive Evaluation Committee, which is made up of executives and also rated researchers. Also, if the person is recommended for an A or a P, the highest categories, all A recommendations and P recommendations are reviewed by the Executive Evaluation Committee before it is communicated to the applicant. And if people don't like the rating or they feel it's not fair, then it can go to an appeals committee. So you can see it's a pretty detailed process in order to come up with the final rating. And this is why it takes a long time. Some people are often concerned, I applied in February and now it's September, I haven't heard anything. So here's the question that I often got in my faculty. Prof. Stella, should I apply for a rating? And so how do you make that decision? Am I ready to apply for a rating? I think there are several things that you should look at, because I think it's important that you want to get the highest rating that you can. And so you do have to think a little bit about, should it be now? Should I wait a year? So one of the first questions would be, how many outputs? And it's not about so much the number, but the quality, not just the count. I've had applications where people have had a tremendous number of articles, but the quality was not at a standard that would allow them to be rated highly. So having a large number of articles is not a guarantee that you're going to get a rating. So here's some questions you can ask. Do my outputs demonstrate focus and coherence? When I look at my work, does it show a research focus? Is it coherent? You have to identify in the system the 5 best outputs. When you look at your output, are you able to identify 5 outputs that are the best? They make a substantial contribution to knowledge. This is the research you would say defines you, the research that you're most well known for. Do you have 5 best outputs? Sometimes in my faculty, people would come, early career researchers, and they only had six journal articles. So my question to them would be, well, if you only have 6 journal articles and you have to pick 5, then think about that. So it's important to really think about, when I say best, is it because I'm settling, or are those truly the best outputs? What is my bibliometric standing, your H index? Now, this is a tricky one because H indices differ depending on the discipline. So in your discipline, what would be considered, if you can think of a standard, what would be considered a good index for an established researcher? How often should your research be cited? What do people expect? So part of knowing when to apply is having an understanding of expectations in your discipline. For example, in the sciences, we know that people, if you compare it to my discipline, if you look at a science CV, somebody in the natural sciences, they're going to have many more articles than somebody in the social sciences because of the way the work is done. And so the number of articles and the H index in those disciplines may be higher. So, you know, an H index of 20 for a professor in my field is a very good index, but maybe an H index of 20 in chemistry is not necessarily at the same level. Has my work been out there long enough to garner citations? So, you know, if all of your articles have only been published in the last 2 years, then you might have not adequate citations. So that's also important. Have I gotten any awards for my research that I could add to my application? Are my outputs in the right outlets for my discipline? Is my work being published in journals that are highly respected and journals that are appropriate for my discipline? Does my output demonstrate the ability to conceptualize and apply strong methodology? Now, I've seen this in some applications, and it makes reviewers wonder. For example, on the application, for every item, for every article that you indicate, every output, you have to indicate what was your contribution. And sometimes people will say, I was responsible for the methodology, but then they say this for every article: methodology, methodology, methodology. Then the reviewers might ask, well, this person seems to be just doing the methodology, but can they conceptualize? Remember, for the C rating, conceptualization and methodology would be expected. Do I have evidence of research independence in leadership? This is particularly an issue for early career scholars. Maybe your early research was with your supervisor. Now, I need to gauge whether or not you're an established researcher. I'm not rating your supervisor. So I'm not saying don't have publications with your supervisor, but we would be looking to see, have you demonstrated the ability to do independent research? Have you established your own name and research focus? Have you attracted your own students? Some evidence of leading on research projects. And the last one, can I nominate reviewers who are familiar with my research network? This is very important because you are rated by your peers. And it's better to put down reviewers, not that you're intimate with them or done a lot of collaboration, but reviewers who would be familiar with your research. I'll talk more about this. But the idea that you're going to get a more thorough review from reviewers who are familiar, either they've seen your work at a conference, they've cited your work, that would be important. So all I'm saying to you, before you apply, and even now, as you're thinking about applying in the future, this list gives you some hints on some of the things you should be thinking about right now. Is my research focused and coherent? Am I publishing in the very best journals in my discipline? Am I building my collaborative network? So hopefully these questions can help you to reflect upon the question of, is it time for me to apply? For young researchers, the expectation is not a lot of output because the reviewers are asked to judge potential. So there may be a question to ask is, where did I publish the research for my thesis? Did I publish it in high quality journals? Did I get some awards as a young researcher? Did I get some special recognition? Maybe even what did the external examiner say about my thesis? You know, I've seen people get a P rating and maybe they only have 3 or 4 outputs, but they're very high quality outputs. And they have gotten recognition for being a bright young talent. So let's talk about what you have to prepare. I tell you, people underestimate this. It's a lot of work to put together an NRF application, but there are things you can do to make it easier. So the first document is a thorough CV. A CV that captures all of your information, your biographical details, but in addition to that, all of your research output. Now, this can be made a lot easier because now the NRF has the NRF submission system. I think they're changing it to NRF Connect, but I would encourage you, and I hope you already do that, each year or as soon as you get them, upload and keep your CV current. It's just a lot easier because there's an interface between the online application and your uploaded CV so that you don't have to type in the information again. It will pull the information from your uploaded CV into your application. So I underline this. Do this as you accumulate output. If you don't do that, doing the application becomes a huge chore. And what's good about doing it as you accumulate it, it can also help you reflect upon those questions and do the kind of research you need. You know, what's the impact factor of that journal? You know, what was my contribution? So that you have a lot of the information you already need. So the system will prompt you to fill in the categories of your application. So the system is quite friendly, I believe. But if you wait and you don't keep your CV uploaded, then it becomes a chore. So this makes it much easier to complete the application if you keep your CV on the NRF system up to date. Now, this is a tricky one because one of the first questions you'll be asked is, what is your discipline? What is your specialization? So on research levels, I think one of the issues that came up a lot in the faculty, not always, if you do multidisciplinary research, the question is, what specialist committee should your application go to? And so this is something you should think about carefully. For example, in my faculty, I had someone, he was in the Faculty of Economic and Management Sciences because he did work on taxation, particularly tax policy. But some of that overlapped with law. So he also did work in law, especially the law related to taxation. So his question was, should I send my application to the law faculty panel or should I send it to the Economic and Management Sciences panel? And so part of the getting the answer to that would be, who would be your peer reviewers and where are they? So we did end up in the end sending it to the Economics and Management Sciences faculty. I don't think that the NRF, it's very difficult for the NRF to have a multidisciplinary specialist committee, unless they've thought about that since I've been involved in the specialist committee. So think about that. The other things is fields of specialization. Do not state too many. Think about that. If you state too many specializations, then the question of coherence becomes an issue. So, maybe one or two. It's also more difficult if you have lots of specializations, which I would not advise. Who are your peer reviewers? Who are the peers? And biographical information. This is something that I'll talk about this, but be honest, but do not be modest. One of the things you get to write is your biography. Who am I? And again, I think that biography also needs to be research focused. So you want to write a biography that kind of gets you to maybe why you choose the research you chose to do, but stay focused on your research. So that we'll come back to that, but sometimes people will often go back too far in time. And because one of the things about the NRF application, you have space limitations. And so remember, when the application goes out to the peer reviewers, the first document they will see and read is your biographical statement. And so my coaching of people was always, if these individuals haven't worked with you closely, they're going to be relying on that application. So you want to set the tone. You want to paint the picture. You want to present your research and why your research is important from the very first sentence of your application. So that when they get to do the assessment and they look at your articles, they are already looking at your work from the lens that you have provided in your biographical statement. Okay, but be careful. Don't brag, I'm the greatest, I'm doing the greatest research in the world on sustainability compared to anybody. Be very careful, because then you're setting an expectation that may not be reflected in the rest of the application. So that's why I say be honest, but do not be modest. Okay, so if you happen to be the top sustainability scholar, say it, but make sure the rest of the application supports that. I think what I'm saying is make sure your storyline in your application is consistent. So the application is an 8-year period. So you get to put down all the outputs that you've produced in the last 8 years. Books, chapters, and books, not textbooks. Do not put textbooks. This is not about teaching. This is about scholarly books. If anything is co-authored, you have to state your contribution. And I would say there, do not use percentages. Use a narrative. Why? Because the reviewers are asked to assess your contribution. And it's better to say, I came up with the idea, I conceptualized the problem, I did the literature review, I collected the data, I was responsible for the research design. So speak to what you actually did. Don't say I did 50% or 30%. We want to know, what did you contribute from a knowledge point of view? The other thing that's an output is peer-reviewed articles, and referee peer-reviewed articles. The list should be comprehensive. Again, I put that red in comprehensive list because the NRF does do some quality control, and so, with the advent of predatory journals, some people left them off of the CV, but they can be found. So be careful there. Or don't put them on the peer-reviewed articles. Put them on the other to acknowledge that they don't really count. Again, co-authored, indicate the contribution. Conference outputs. I would say there, if you have a lot, put the best ones. If they're keynotes, if the conference is refereed, indicate that. Now, depending on your discipline, an output would be a patent. An output could be an artifact, if you're an artist. An output can be a jazz performance. Those are all considered to be research outputs, keynote addresses. But don't put anything that cannot be documented. So, if you did a talk to a community group, that's not a peer-reviewed, that would not be considered an output. Other research-based contributions, contract research, research projects, and non-peer-reviewed articles or papers. It has to be something that we can find, that people can look at, that people can assess. So you'll have to fill in all of this information in the application. And the key one is then you have to identify the 5 best research outputs of all of those things you've produced in the last 8 years. What would you select as your 5 best exemplary output? Because these 5 research outputs will be sent to the peer reviewers. We ask the peer reviewers, please read these 5 research outputs. You can read more if you want, but at a minimum, read these 5. And for each of these, you must say, why did you select this particular output as one of your best? And so there, your justification would be a little bit different. It might be saying, this paper has the most citations. This was an award-winning article. This book got the Literary Award of South Africa. So you need to put a motivation into why do you consider it to be your best? They also ask you to put down the best research outputs of students you've supervised over the years. So you also get to include student work. That gives a sense of the impact of your supervision. The application also allows you to list the best research outputs prior to the last 8 years. So again, you, like me now, I have so many, so I don't put everything, I select the best ones and include that in the list. And as I said, for each co-authored output, you must indicate what your contribution was. And I encourage you, do not rely on percentages. Use narrative language. Okay, this is the part that I think was the hardest for me in the beginning when I first applied. You have to write 4 essays, 4 persuasive essays about your work. And so I want to talk about those. So the first one I kind of alluded to before, your biographical profile. Who are you as a researcher? And I think you should write it that way. Who am I as a researcher? What is my focus? What have I done? What is the research activity I've engaged in? So what might you include in there? Well, I think you should always start with what your research focus is, and then to talk about any awards, professional service to the discipline, research leadership roles. Now I put there right last. The reason why you should write it last, because the application space is stingy, because it's based on character count, not word count. So I think the completed research, the self-assessment, and the future research, I think you have 11,000 characters to describe what you do. So I say, do the other three, and anything related to research that you could not fit into those three, then put it into the biographical profile. But in the way the application is put together, when it goes to the reviewers, the first thing they're going to read is the biographical profile. So you want that to be a basic, solid introduction to your research focus, what you've done as a researcher, and to highlight key things. For example, you might put down there that I've led research projects in my discipline. I was voted into ASAF. So there you can highlight things that often do not fit in other places, but write it last. I tell people draft it, but then do your whole application, then go back and polish it. Let me say this, never try to write the application online. I would say write your essays as Word documents so that you can edit them. You can also send them to other people to read, to really polish them. So the first thing you have to write is a description of yourself as a scholar, the biographical profile. The next one, which takes a lot of writing and making each word count, is a brief description of your completed research. So the research that you completed over the 8 years, you have to describe it in a narrative. And you need to weave a narrative that discusses your major completed research over the 8-year period. This one always takes me the longest. It takes me the longest because I have to think about what is the storyline that I want to weave, and then to show how each article fits into my research focus. So describing the research focus, and then where your research fits, what I do, let's back up. I think it's important, even though if the reviewers are familiar with your work, they may know this, but maybe they don't. So I think what you got to capture in that essay, based on my experience and successful applications I've seen, describing your research focus, but then saying, why is your focus so important to the discipline? Establishing the importance of that area you focus on in the discipline, and then showing and describing thereafter how each article, book chapter, whatever you've done, fits into that research focus. So then you begin to describe the articles, the chapters in the book. So for example, this article I wrote on this topic, it made the contribution of this aspect. And so you can concentrate on the 5 best outputs as you write this narrative, but you have more articles that you want to highlight. So I just did an example from my last application for that section. So I start out by describing what my research focuses on. Then with the exact body of knowledge, I point out why my research is important in the field of management and organization studies. And then I go down to, well, my approach to researching this, I tell them what my approach is, you see? So this is what the review, this is my research focus, here's why it's important, and how I approach researching this important topic. And then From there, I didn't show you the whole application. Then I go to what have I done over the last 8 years? So I said, made a number of contributions. And then I started unpacking each of what I considered to be the most important outputs. So you notice I actually mentioned the article. It's important to mention the article so that the reviewer then could go and if it's one of your best 5 outputs, then they can see what you think the contribution has been of that article. And so it's not just to say I published this article in the journal, it was published in 2011. You need to say something about what did that article contribute to knowledge on that topic. Now, remember I said to you, you got to cover all of this in 11,000 characters. So it takes a while to really make each word count. But it's up to you. This is what I'm saying about the application. It's up to you to write a persuasive essay to showcase and highlight your research in terms of the contribution it is making to knowledge. That's very important. It's not a list. It's really to say, this article contributed this to the discipline. You know, from that article, my next article followed up on that. If the article is co-authored, you can say co-authored. You don't have to put the co-author's name there. But this narrative, I think, is one of the keys for really people understanding what your research is about and the contribution it's making to knowledge. So once you have described this completed research, then the next question, the next essay is now you're asked to do a self-assessment. Now, I think for all of us, doing a self-assessment is often difficult because, you know, maybe we haven't thought about it. Maybe some of us are wondering, what do I put there? So sometimes it's hard to look at, if you step back to look at your work, how would you assess it? What evidence would you use? And so the self-assessment of the completed research, what should you cover? What can I use as metrics for the assessment? Well, I think there's ABC, three things you can think about. Quality and productivity. How would you assess your own quality, the quality of your own research, and the level of productivity? So the quality, you can look at the impact factors. That's the simple start. Look at the journals you've published in. So you can say, I have published in high quality journals in my field. The average impact factor of the journals I've published in is, 3.5. Or, that's one indication. Citations, which you can get through Google Scholar. How often has your work been cited? I think the citation indicates that people are reading my work. They're using my work. You could talk about who is citing your work. You can indicate if you got any best paper awards, that you get some best paper awards. And so it's not you just saying I'm the greatest thing since peanut butter, I'm the greatest thing since vanilla ice cream, but what evidence can you pull into this essay that confirms that you are a good, solid researcher or a leading researcher? Now, the level of evidence increases depending on the rating. So if you are thinking my application is an A level, then on the quality, I think your peers would be expecting that you are publishing in the elite top journals in the field. If it's in the history of the social sciences, maybe they would have expected that you have written a book that got some awards. So it really depends on where you are in that system. So what are the quality indicators? You could use an H index. Impact and recognition. Have you gotten any awards for your work? Have you won awards for your work? What other recognition have you gotten from others in the discipline? Were you selected to be a conference chair? Are you a co-investigator on an important research project? So what evidence can you pull in? Quantity. It's not so much the total number, but you can talk about how you're, over the 8-year period, how the quantity of your research is increasing, you know? You can talk about people inviting you to be a co-author, inviting you to join a research team. So B is a growth as a researcher. This is important. This is very important. Let's say you already got a C rating. Now you're doing your next application. You're aiming for a B rating. So you would want to show that, you know, in my last rating, I didn't publish as much in international journals, but now all of my work over these last few years has been in international journals. So you also want to show that you're growing as a researcher. Now you're being asked to do keynote addresses. Your research topic is at the leading edge of the research conversations in the field. So my research is really focused on a really huge problem in the discipline, something that's occupying the minds of people in my discipline. Also, I have collaborations. I'm collaborating with, and there, you know, you can't just say I'm collaborating. You'd have to say the evidence. I'm collaborating with scholars from other parts of the world, other parts of Africa. And so this is all an indication that you have the evidence to justify. Impact on policy or practice. I think I'm doing good work because my work is being applied in the real world. I get patents for my research. My research is being used by community groups, is being used by industry. I got an industry award. Industry comes to me to consult with me on this topic. So again, do not be modest, but be honest. Evidence that people can look to and tell a convincing story. So I think if you cover A, B, and C, then it's easier to write a self-assessment in terms of trying to look at yourself in the mirror and say, look at all this research I produced. What is the quality of it and impact? So think of impact beyond just citations and journal impact factors. There are other indications of impact. And the last essay is a description of your future research. Why does the NRF ask that question? Well, that's another indication of whether or not you are an established researcher or a leading researcher. I've seen this in applications, in review letters where the reviewers will say, well, this person is doing good research, but when I looked at their future research vision, they really are not thinking ahead. And so I'm concerned that they may be not as versed in the field as they should be. That's one way of looking at it. The other thing is the NRF asks the reviewers to give you feedback on your application. So your peer reviewers will look at your vision statement and they might give you some helpful feedback on how you might take your research forward. So in the description of future research, do not just list, I have the following articles or the following work in progress. That is fine. This is also about what is your vision? What is the research questions you will be looking at over the next 5 years? What are the big questions in your discipline? Which ones do you want to focus on? What is the potential impact of your research vision? Why is it important to be looking at that? So again, looking for growth, your growth as a researcher, and the expansion of your research topics. I'm going to be pursuing international collaborations with XYZ because I want to attract more doctoral students to my focus. I'm going to seek funding, but you need to write it as a vision, not just list. I have the following research outputs under consideration. So the tip for all of your essays, all of them, do not be modest, but do not exaggerate. Make a convincing case. I want my application shows that I'm an established researcher. My application confirms that I'm a leading researcher. Anybody reading this research application could not conclude otherwise. Draft your essays in a Word document and panel beat. Panel beat. I really mean this. And what I do, even with mine, get friendly feedback on your essays. So, make sure you allow enough time to have friendly reviews of people. Now, I know that we do the mock NRF applications in this program, and you will get feedback from that. But this is very important. As I said to you, even though I'm an A-rated researcher, I would not send my application in without getting feedback from people on my application. And so you have a chance to make it as strong as possible, okay? Because some of the reviewers, I'll come to that, but I'll say now, some of the reviewers won't know you because you get to nominate reviewers, but it doesn't mean that the NRF is going to select all of your reviewers. So you may get reviewers who are in your discipline, but they don't know your work. So this may be their first knowledge of your work. So it's very important that the essays are very well done. We talked a little bit about choosing the specialist panel. Yes, so you have to select what discipline of what specialist panel. I already talked about this, especially if you bridge two fields. Feedback, you can request feedback. You are entitled to it. It may assist you with future applications. So you can get feedback, and actually the NRF has a feedback at each specialist committee. There is a feedback writer. We get assistance, and when we finish agreeing on the rating for that applicant, we then talk about what feedback should this applicant get. And so we agree on the feedback, and then that feedback is part of the decision letter that you receive. Okay, I'll go over this and then I'll stop. So what are reviewers asked to evaluate on your application? This is exactly what reviewers are asked. They're asked to assess the quality and impact that your research has had on a specific research field. They're asked to review the standing and appropriateness of the journals, where your output is. They'll be asked, in a sense, what's the standing of this research? The journals, are they publishing in the right places? Are there any publications in predatory journals? If there's group work, assessment of the applicant's contribution. What is the significance of this person's research in the broader context of the discipline? How important is this research? Are you aware of the impact of this research on industry or societies? Now, this is something you should know, which I didn't know, the note, when I first applied. The first thing the specialist committee has to do as we read those letters, as we read the evaluation report, we have to rate the quality of the report from excellent to not usable. So evaluations that are inadequate, we throw them out. They are not used in assessing the applicant. We throw them out, and then we look for more reviewers. Reviewers who get low scores, we don't use them again. So reviewers are rated so that in the end, we only want to use quality reports to judge the applicant's rating. And this is why sometimes it takes a long time to get assessed, because sometimes it's difficult to get people to follow up, or many requests. But yeah, this is important to know. We also asked them, okay, so we asked them, okay, how would you rate this applicant relative to his or her peers in the field? Where do they stand? This is trying to get a sense of their standing. Are they at the top of that group, in the middle of that group? Are they leading that group? We asked them also, what is the size of this discipline? Is it a big discipline? Is it a small discipline? Because that does indicate, if you're, where do you, if it's a small discipline, that might impact how people think about what your contribution is versus a large discipline. Sometimes reviewers can't answer that one, but we're trying to get, remember I said the NRF wants to get a sense of your relative standing. So reviewers are asked to help with understanding in that discipline. Are you in the middle of the group? Are you a leading group, a leader of the group? So they're asked, national and international standing. So you can be the leading national person in that discipline, and you can get like a B3, probably a C1. Yeah, so the NRF is trying to be much more sensitive to that idea of where do you stand. And they're told to base their judgment primarily on the research outputs of the last 8 years. So in a sense, if you're going to be a rated researcher throughout your academic career, the NRF rating kind of pushes you to continue your productivity because it's looking at 8-year periods. So you can't get a rating and then you just stop producing. It's a continuous process of productivity. So how do you select your reviewers? Now you get to nominate reviewers. You get to nominate at least 6 people, and you can motivate. As I said, I'm just frankly saying to you that the NRF will use some of the people you nominate, but they will not use all of them because they also want to have independent reviewers. So national reviewers, select carefully if you're involved in multidisciplinary research. So if you have multidisciplinary research, make sure your reviewers represent that multiple discipline lens. So the example I use, some people who know about tax policy, some people who know about tax law. It's good if you can suggest reviewers who are familiar with your work. Maybe people you've met at conferences, people who have cited your work, who use your work in terms of your area of specialization. International reviewers pretty much would be the same thing. Now, if you are going for an A or B rating, I would think all 6 of those nominees might be international, more, or at least more international. Let's put it that way. If you have to nominate 6, I would think that you would be, more of those would be international, more of them would be higher level people. So if you're going for a or B rating, I don't think you would put down a senior lecturer as one of the reviewers. So you have to think about the relative standing that you want to have look at your work. Collaborators with a question mark. Should I put down a collaborator? If it's a close collaborator, I would say no, I would not advise you to do that. Because think about it. Maybe one of the pieces of research you collaborated on is one of the best 5 outputs. So how could a collaborator say it's not good work? If it's distant collaboration that happened once many years ago, that might be used by the NRF. But I would generally say, think long and hard about using collaborators unless it's a distant collaborator. Of course, you don't use your supervisor. Should you exclude reviewers? This always comes up. You know, this person, so here's the question. What's the reason for excluding this reviewer? I think the ones that specialist committees typically respect is if you say, I didn't put down this reviewer because, I want to exclude this reviewer because my research uses qualitative methodology and this individual is a very quantitative scholar who I know doesn't have a good attitude about qualitative research. So it has to be some substantive philosophical basis to say, you know, I think this researcher should be excluded. So use the option with caution. If there's a legitimate reason for saying, please don't send my application to this person, you can discuss it with your deputy dean for research and postgraduate studies or somebody and get the advice on whether or not you should exclude them. Now, this is something I found on that note. You may have to brief international researchers about the rating because many countries don't have a national rating system like South Africa. So I know when I first applied many years ago, I called my colleagues and say, can I put you down for this application? And they said, well, what is it? What are we supposed to do? Why are they doing that? They didn't quite understand what it was about. So you should explain to them before you put their name down, what the NRF, or you could refer them to the NRF website so that they understand what the system is about, because many countries don't have the system that we have. So when you're done, make sure you work through the checklist, that you've done everything is correct, it's comprehensive and correct. Now, set aside adequate time for the application. On average, just to get the application done, it can take you at least 2 weeks to actually get it done. And if you want to get feedback and recycle through it, it can take longer. Editorial issues. Pay attention to spelling, grammatical errors, inconsistencies, uniformity in your reference style, and do a proper word count. Because what happens if you don't do that, your application, parts of what you've said will be cut off and missed. So you want to send in a very well-crafted, technically and substance-wise application. I think that's everything now. Okay, I covered a lot. I hope that I can answer questions. If I missed anything that you want to know about, if you want to know more about my application experiences, I'm happy to answer it.
Thank you very much for that very comprehensive presentation, Professor Nkomo. We couldn't have asked anybody better. I think your own experiences, and of course, not only having gone through it yourself, but as having chaired the committees and even being member of the panel and appeals committee. One of the I'm sorry to indicate that I think 2 or 3 people had to drop out. They were
Okay.
going to go into load shedding at about.
Oh, boy. Yeah.
But we still got about 22 people that are still around. One of those persons who has gone was actually asking for an example of an application form or how an NRF application form looks like. And in my chart, I indicated those are available, in fact, at the NRF, or in fact, we could share whatever at the later stage. But let's now, open up for questions and comments. Colleagues, you are now free. If you can just indicate, you can raise your hand. I see Sabelo Hadebe has already got a hand up. Sabelo, you want to pose a question?
Yes, I wanted to ask about so I think it was in the reflection section.
Yes.
Or self-reflection section where, because I wanted to know, like in things like, say, you've reviewed grants, whether it's for NRF or MRC or any other place. Does those things count, and would they go under that section?
Yeah, okay. Well, yeah, you could use it in the self-assessment, because that would indicate that people consider you to have the research knowledge. So you can say, I have been asked by the NRF to review applications in my discipline. Yes, exactly. Because when people ask you to do that, what are they saying? They're saying you have knowledge about that particular area. So that would be things to put in the self-assessment. Yes.
Let me ask.
Okay.
Oh, did you want to continue with that question? Or should I ask the other two? Let me ask Asanda and Jeremiah, if you could ask your 2 questions, then we'll give chance again to Prof. Nkomo to respond. Asanda and then Jeremiah.
Thank you, Prof. I wanted to ask, with regards to excluding, reviewers, what if we have a personal issue, with one reviewer, which may cloud their judgment? So how do you handle that one?
I didn't hear the part. What's the challenge with the reviewer?
I'm asking, Prof, what if we have a personal issue, with.
Well, you can say that. You can say that.
Okay.
You can say that there is a personal issue and it would probably interfere with me getting an objective analysis. Yeah.
Okay, Prof. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you.
But you can you see for each on the application. Let me just go back to what the question about, can you see an application? If you go to the NRF website, they have lots of diagrams and illustrations, because the application is an online application. You actually fill it out online. You can save work and go back to it later. That's why I was saying to you, write your essays in a Word document, because then you can just cut and paste those into the applications. But you can work on the application, different sections, save it and go back to it. Okay, but no, if it's a personal issue, just indicate it's a personal issue, and it would be better not to include this person.
Thank you, Prof. Thanks.
Yeah.
Jeremiah?
Thank you, Prof, and thank you for a very insightful and a very spot-on presentation. My question is very simple, Prof. Right from the onset, and also when you do the self-assessment.
Yes.
Please share with us, did you perhaps know which category you were applying for, or basically it was decided by the panel from the NRF?
Okay, that's a good question.
Here with me. I hope I didn't miss it if you mentioned it at the beginning. Thank you.
No, I didn't. Good question, Jeremiah. Okay, so as I said, when I first came to South Africa, I was already a professor. I already had a lot of publications. So my colleagues at UNISA, I didn't know about this system. They said, oh, you must apply. And so I said, Okay, and they all said to me, we're sure you're going to get a B rating. I didn't even know what a B rating was. They said to me, they looked at my CV and said, oh, we're sure, Stella, you're going to get a B rating. Okay, so sometimes the people who will tell you what they think your rating is people outside. So there's a lot of things that relate to that. So you can have your own judgment. That's why those questions I gave you in the beginning, when should I apply? I find that sometimes people apply too soon. And you don't want that, because I think if you get an RU, rating unsuccessful. They don't say they just say RU, rating unsuccessful. It's normally because the person went up too early. So the first thing is for you to think about those questions and say, can I answer positively to those questions that I gave you? Then you should consult with your HOD. What do you think? Or another rated researcher in your department or faculty. So what we did at UP, as I told you, we would ask the HODs, who do you think in your department might be ready to go up for a C rating or whatever, or rating? And then they would bring the CVs and we would look at them. So often we will advise people. Now, I don't know how this works at UJ, but at UP, once you fill out the application and the faculty sends it forward, UP had a panel headed by the deputy principal, the principal, vice principal for research, and consisting of all the deputy deans of the faculties, which included me, and then all of the A-rated, some of the A-rated researchers at UP. That was a final screening of your application, and that committee could say, no, person's not ready. But the other thing that application did is they would say, we think this person is a C, a B, or an A. So when your application goes to the NRF, the institution has indicated, we think this is a C. We think this is a B. But that does not influence the decision. It's just that they want to see that the university thought about it, you see? So yes, so it's what do you think? What do people in your HOD, your dean? So you should get some advice, okay? Yes. So when I went up at first, everybody said to me, we're sure you're gonna get a B. And so I thought, well, that sounds, I'm just coming to South Africa, that's fine. And I did get a B. The next 5 years, the next time I applied is when I got the A. But I also kind of knew because of how my work had grown. But see it's good to talk to other people. That's a long-winded answer, but yes. But I think for young researchers, what I say to you, do not go up too soon, because it can be psychologically harmful. So seek people's opinion. I think I'm ready. What do you think? Look at my CV.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you very much.
Professor Nkomo. One of the things that I've often appreciated about the NRF rating, or even in academia, I've always compared to, even for the purpose of, although not the same, but even when people go for promotion, you always knew what it is that the university is asking for. So yes. One, always be prepared and say to yourself, am I actually ready to submit for promotion? I think yes. Increasingly, of course, people have simply said, well, I've got a PhD, so go ahead and apply and I should be promoted. But yeah. Similarly, in the rating system, as you have indicated, the idea of one being very clear. Anyway, let me, Tanyani has asked a question here in the chat, and is asking the 5 best articles that yes. one identify. Should they be discipline specific or area focus specific within the discipline? The question is simply,
yeah. Okay, that's it. Yeah, it must be for your research focus. Okay, so if my research focus is race and gender and diversity, and then I I did this odd thing with somebody on sustainability. If that did not have a race and gender aspect to it, I would not put that as one of my best research outputs, even if it was published in a top journal. You see that? So your best 5 outputs should clearly be aligned to your research focus. Remember, the key word in the C rating is coherence. Coherence. Remember this, to be an established researcher, you can't be doing research on many different topics all over the place, right? So that would be important. Don't try not to do that. That's why I said to early scholars, you know, sometimes you see this on NRF applications where you can see that this person thought that the NRF rating is about quantity. So somebody invited me to be on an article that has nothing to do with my topic, but I went ahead and worked on that, you see? So you don't want to do that. So the best 5 research outputs that demonstrates that you have a focus, and that focus has been published in good quality journals in that discipline. So where would your peers expect your research to be published? You see? So remember, this is a peer review system. And again, maybe it makes sense to you now why in these programs we emphasize building collaborative relationships and getting to know people. You need to know your scholarly community. Your scholarly community is going to teach you and let you understand what they consider to be high quality outlets, you see? So that's a long-winded answer, but you can start now thinking about that. Go back and look at your CVs for now and say, you know, look at my research. Is it coherent? You know, that's the most important word, coherence. So if somebody invites you to do something that has nothing to do with your topic because you think it's going to be an easy publication so you can get your, you know, publication output funds, that's not a good strategy. Stay away from it. Say, no, I'd love to work with you, but it's not a, I just had this with a mentee. I said to her, you need to start saying, thank you for inviting me, but that will take me away from my focus.
Thank you very much for that, Prof. Before I ask Jai and Sabelo to make a comment, just to indicate to applicants, and you emphasize the point about the, you know, the application and how much time it consumes. It is important, and the applicants should be, and all of you must understand that at the moment, the NRF, you can actually start compiling your CV on the NRF system.
Right now, yes.
Although the application for rating opens in September, you can start working slowly, and acquainting yourself with the system. So it's important. You can then do that slowly as you go. And of course, the other things you can prepare in Word document, which you can then upload later. So it's important to do that. So let me ask Jai to ask, a question. I see that Sabelo has dropped off again. But Jai, if you want to go ahead and then ask Pero, I see, the hand is up. Jai, you want to go ahead?
Thank you so much, Prof. Thank you, Prof, for the presentation. I'm going to go back to Jeremiah's point about the rating that you're applying for. So my question is linked to that. So in your presentation, you provided some age guidelines for the different ratings.
Yes.
And I'm going to use me as an example. So I entered academia quite late because I worked clinically for 12 years.
Yes.
And I then got my PhD quite late as well. And 2 years after getting my PhD, I became HOD. So my publication record had a bit of a dry spell after my PhD.
Yes.
So I'm now in my mid-40s. How do I need to explain that under the self-assessment?
No, don't. Yes, no, don't do that.
HOD, but there is a very myself.
Yeah, you were breaking up a little bit, but I think I hear the question. You're saying that, you know, you started late and that you are past 40 and that you've been in HOD, which may reflect your research productivity, right? Did I get it right?
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
I think you must ask those same questions I asked there, because clearly, once you don't meet the age requirement or the time that you've had your PhD, then where you want to enter is as a C-rated researcher. You want to at least get a C3, which says you're established, you have coherence, you know how to conceptualize problems, and you have you know how to apply methodology. You see? So the question for you would be, where are you now? So like, how many publications do you have? What is the quality? If the quality is good and you have enough research where you can select 5 research outputs, I don't know how many articles you have, but the key is, can I find 5 best outputs that exemplifies my research that's high quality? You see, it won't help you to say, well, I want to go ahead and apply, and please take into consideration that I was an HOD and I only had 3 articles. You see, so I would say to you, do not panic. Are you still an HOD?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
I've stepped down.
That's good. I'm glad to hear that. I've been an HOD. I mean, of course, you cannot do research when you're an HOD. So what you need to, and you know, and I wish they had this in South Africa. I have argued for this, but nobody listens to me. I think people who sacrifice themselves to be HODs, they should be given, after they complete their HOD and they've done a good job, you should be given a year of sabbatical paid so that you can make the transition and accelerate your research. And then they would, I think they owe it to you, but they're not going to do this. So what I would say to you, Jay, is don't panic. What you need to do is get yourself back on your research track. Okay? Yeah. And then I would say to you, you know, I always tell people, that's why I said each case is individual. I would say do that. Now get back on your research focus. What you need to do is look at the research you've done. Do I have a clear focus? You know, do all of my articles that I currently have, even though they're not that many, do they show independence? And then after that, apply. So go back into your research and try to accelerate your productivity. But don't despair. You still find many people. We see many applications where people are coming back at that age. There's no age limit on it. It's just being ready, because you want to be successful. That's what I stressed as the deputy dean. I was very blunt with people. I would say, I think you're going to be disappointed, but you don't have to listen to me. But I've seen the impact on people where they don't get the rating. It's very discouraging. So, but you're okay. Don't panic. Just do more research and stay away from HOD jobs for a while.
Your comment, Prof, about not panicking for Jay is critical, because it's also, you know, important for Jay to understand. Let's assume that you accumulate reasonably good and impactful research in the next 3 or 4 years, and you attend a C3 rating. Let's start from there. You may not necessarily even last another 6 years to actually move up, because if you're prolific and it's impactful, in 3 years' time after that, you can go early, you know, in terms of completion of another rating. They don't stop you to say, well, you have to complete the 6 years in order to come back, or 5 years in order for you to actually apply again. So your prolific nature of the work that you do, you know, so the point about not panicking is an important one. Let's go to, I see Sabelo has returned, but let me ask Pearl, because I think Pearl, you are up there.
Yeah, Pearl was earlier, yes. Pearl has been waiting.
Pearl, you want to ask a question, then we'll come back to Sabelo and then Witness.
Thank you so much for an opportunity, Prof, and a lovely presentation. I wanted to ask about the advice in terms of editing the Excel spreadsheet on the research focus area, because I realized that in my application, there were many research focus areas. How do I now request NRF to actually edit what's there and then put the relevant research focus area?
When you say, what do you, where, I'm sorry, I didn't get the first part. You already have something where?
I'm already a Y-rated researcher, but when I applied, I had many research focus areas. So now I would like to edit this Excel spreadsheet.
Oh, I don't know the technicality of that, but when did you get your Y rating?
Last year, towards the end of the year.
Okay, and so at the time that you did that Y rating, you indicated many research focus areas. Is that what you're saying? Okay. Yes. And you want to correct that, but I don't think you can correct an old application. Where do you want to correct this at?
On the Excel spreadsheet that is there or available on the NRF system.
I don't know how to do that technical thing. I think you might have to contact somebody at the NRF.
Okay.
Just a comment on the point about, remember again, if it's attached to the CV, that's editable as
you can edit it. Yes, yes.
Because you can edit. Remember that the CV you have on the NRF system
is yours.
It will be used for the rating system, which, as Prof was indicating, it will be uploaded. But that's the same, that's the same CV that we use for application for grants. So that's one reason we emphasize that constantly go back to the system, just update that. But in respect to the rating system, you've got the Y rating now. If what you're looking for is actually just updating, go back to the system. All you want to do is update your CV, and it will give you an indication on that. Otherwise, if you have problems, consult the reviews and evaluation, and they will assist you with that.
Okay.
So let's go to Sabelo. And Sabelo, did you have a follow-up question?
Yes,
go ahead,
please.
Yeah, go ahead.
I wanted to ask for the tips in terms of working towards collaboration, especially when it comes to the doctoral supervision with the international scholars. Any tips on how to navigate that space?
Okay, so have you done doctoral supervision?
I have 2 at the moment.
Okay.
They're about to complete.
Good. Okay, so so that you should keep on doing some of that and look for opportunities. In terms of international collaboration, it's like dating. I mean, people have to get to know you, Pearl. You have to go. When I say go in the virtual space, but you have to go and be where would your collaborators be found? So it's going to be people in your discipline. So you have to attend conferences. You have to quote unquote network and then seek opportunities there. You cannot do it just by writing to somebody and say, can I collaborate with you? Because we're not going to just collaborate with somebody we don't know. So I would ask you, what are you doing to, the COVID-19 really interrupted some of this, but, attending conferences, going to sessions, presenting papers, when you go to a conference, you go to the sessions where people are presenting papers on your topic, you present. That's how you begin to meet people and say, oh, wow, what are you working on? I'm working on that. So that is something as a Y researcher you should be working on. To also, I know everybody stresses international collaborations. I always tell people, look for collaborations in South Africa. People at other institutions, who else is working in the area that I'm working in? It's often easier for us to connect here because at least people, you say, I'm at Rhodes University, I'm at UJ. So people would be interested in talking to you. So I would say, think about concentric circles. So first reach out for national people who are working in your area. Maybe you go to local conferences. Maybe you contact people and say, oh, I see you're working on this. I read your article. You know, I'm at UJ. I see you at Vits. Can we have a cup of coffee or tea? Then think about other people in Africa who might be working on your topic. Are there any opportunities for me to get to know them? And then build it internationally. So I always say to young scholars, think of 3 circles: a network of national people, then the continental, and then outside. But it's a little bit like a dating, really. I hate to say it, but it is.
Thank you so much, Prof.
Thanks very much for that question, Pearl. Interestingly enough, you might find it funny the way that Professor Nkomo says it. One of the things that we always have been thinking about, and we rarely have done this in South Africa, and especially as the NRF when I was at the NRF. But when you look at areas like the National Science Foundation or the councils in the United Kingdom, they always even have what they have, functions and processes that they actually put funds in there for speed dating. They actually call it speed dating, bring in all the different people just over a cup of coffee, wine, and various, not necessarily a full conference, but essentially for people to meet one another, to actually start talking and have the opportunity locally to actually, collaborate. But that's another conversation for another day. Let's go to Sabelo and then Witness.
So my question was around, this early trying to get NRF rating earlier than, because I think we can also there's also a possibility that us as early carriers, we also leave it too late. So, I mean, I tried to go for an NRF rating, I think it was last year or something, 2020, but university said probably don't do it because you've just passed the Y rating phase and, we're not sure if you're gonna get a C, so maybe just wait. But I feel like sometimes because we don't, I don't know, it's, NRF system seems like, at least the NRF rating system seems like some kind of a movement. I think this is the first time where it's actually been a little bit more clear. But it's just, you don't know when to do it, and then you wait for too long. Obviously, if you wait a bit longer, people are going to judge you also because you've been in the system for so long and you have not managed to get a rating. And of course, people would look at cumulative work over a long period of time. And then maybe you also don't get a rating because you've waited for too long and you just don't fit in whatever category. But I mean, the other question, more specific question I had was around how much emphasis does the NRF put on a C rating in terms of research funding? Because I think, depending on different universities, they obviously have a different perspective on that. According to NRF, do they expect, say, for a C rating, do they expect you to have got NRF grants or international grants?
No.
How is that actually charged?
No, the grant, no, that would not be something that would prevent you from not getting a rating if you didn't have any international grants. Remember, the NRF does not rate you. It's your peers. I need to say this to folks. The NRF does not rate anybody. The NRF manages the process. The people who end up rating you are your peer reviewers, and even the specialist committee. Like if I'm sitting on the specialist committee, I cannot say, as Stella, I think this person is a C. No, I have to read the letters from your peer reviewers. What did your peer reviewers say about your research? So I said to somebody, we become very close readers. Our reading skills, and then the specialist committee, we will be an odd number, I forget how many, but there'll be at least 5 or 7 of us. And we've independently read those 6 letters. And I have to go in the system and say, okay, the letter from peer reviewer 1, this letter seems to say this person has coherence, this person has sustained research, this person is working on a important topic. And then I look at the criteria and I said, this looks like this person is saying, or maybe the person said, and this person's work is getting some international recognition. So depending on what that letter says, then I have to put down, this reviewer says the applicant is a C2. You see? So we all do that independently. So that's the first thing I want to stress. Now, where will a research grant help you? Well, I would expect perhaps that the research grants would be an indication that you are working on, it's more like evidence that you're working on an important topic, right? Maybe for your discipline, for some disciplines, grants are more important. Like in the economic and management sciences, it's very hard for us to get a lot of grants because people think we're in a business field and there's a lot of money. So I would say to you, it really depends on your discipline. The first question you asked, though, I think is the most difficult, the timing. When should you go up? You know, and so if you have a Y rating, remember I said to you, when you get a Y rating, the expectation is that when you go up again, that you will go right to the C category. So that means that you yourself should do some judgment about, okay, what did my CV look like when I got the Y rating? Everything I've done now, how does that significantly change my research profile? Now, something else you should look at, you're right, because you have to think that each year, some of the articles you had or outputs will drop off because the range of the 8 years will change. So maybe you had some very high quality output that you don't want to lose in the next round. So you have to consider that, you see, or vice versa. Sometimes I see applications from young researchers where they have under review 2 or 3 articles in very good journals, and I'll ask them and say, what do you think? Do you think those articles will come out in the next year or 2? Well, maybe you should wait, you see? So it's a lot of judgment calls, and you try to get as much advice as you can. That's the best way I can answer that.
Thank you very much, Prof. Nkomo. We can come back to that maybe when we have time. We've only got about 4 minutes to go before the end of the 2 hours, which has run very quickly because of the, just the excitement of this particular topic. Witness, you want to ask your question?
Yes, Prof. Thank you very much, Professor. This was very insightful. Prof, I just want to ask about the issue of age in terms of Y rating, because majority of Y rated researchers, you find that some of them, they do qualify to be C rated. However, because of age, they fall short in terms of being rated as Y researchers. I just want your thought on that. And then lastly, the issue of having specialists who don't even understand your research area, and then your reviewer says the NRF subject your application to them. Just your thought on that as well. Thank you, Professor.
Well, sorry, the rule is kind of, you could say, is age bias, but the definition of what young is, we could debate. But you still have an opportunity to get rated as a C. Now, getting a Y and the P is only different because they focus on potential, right? And so, yes, it does get a little tricky because maybe you only enter academia at a late age. But I would just say that then it means that you must aim for a C rating. In terms of, now I lost the second part of your question. I had it for a minute.
It's a specialist committee that I was concerned about submitting it to the specialist who don't know it.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So that's a tricky part. But now I think they've expanded the specialist committee, and this is where you must get advice. As I told you, I had a colleague who was his research was on tax policy, but he also worked in the law, had some stuff in the law space. Do you send it to the law committee? Do you send it to the tax committee? And we finally looked at the output, who would be the most knowledgeable. So I think you should get some advice from that, from senior people about what is the best committee. I think last time that the NRF had like 42 specialist committees. I have the other issue I have in my faculty was we have industrial and organizational psychology people. IOP can be under economic and management sciences, or you could go to the psychology specialist committee. So I always tell people, let's look at your CV and see where you're publishing. You know, so if you're publishing in a lot of management journals, even though you're an IOP, you should probably go to the management panel. So I think each case has to be looked at very closely. Who are your peers? That's the question you're really asking. How do I find my peers? Because the peers are going to be the best judges of your research. But I would say when you have something that's not clear, is get advice from HOD, from your deans and other people who have, the NRF, it used to be Joyce Olivier, I don't know who it is now. The NRF can kind of try to advise you on that too, if you ask them, because they might be able to share with you how other people resolve that issue. But it can be an issue, especially if you do multidisciplinary research.
It's still Joyce Olivier, and the email address is still on the website. But the other part of it, Prof, is of course, not only is it a question of the specialist committee, but as you indicated, the applicant would have also indicated to the to the panel potential reviewers. So that he or she has identified the category of people that are working in that area who understand, quote unquote, his work. Similarly, that particular panel would also be looking for that. So those reviewers will be the ones that will comment on the work that then comes to the specialist committee. So there are all those controls that also help. I unfortunately, we are running out of time. And of course, this is a very exciting, conversation. Just to remind you, please, if you can make sure that you complete the evaluation for this particular brown bag, so that we'll also understand your experiences, and perhaps we could ask Professor Nkomo once again to come and present, and or further conversations later. So there is a link that has been posted. If you can do that, please. And thank you very much for the comments, and I'm glad, especially for the various comments that were going in the background, indicating that you have, many of you have had some clarity of the process, and even those who felt that perhaps because of issues of age that perhaps you would not find the opportunity to do. And I think the point to take home is essentially what Professor Nkomo indicated, especially in terms of the fact that do not panic, because there is, I think the opportunity to submit and work towards that in terms of the work that that you're doing. So let me ask, Dr. Menon, Kate Menon, to say a few words before we close. And thank you very much from my side, Professor Nkomo, for your presentation. Kate, you want to go ahead?
Prof. Nkomo, sorry, Andrew, are you in complete darkness? A medal for you for perseverance.
Yes, indeed. I'm in darkness. Luckily, I'm not using a UPS for my Wi-Fi, but
well, you can have a bravery medal from us. Prof. Nkomo, this was so insightful, and I'm stealing words from Asanda here, and informative. And to use your own words, we are going to ask you for a date again, but you're going to date us. And I think that all our FPP participants would love to have a very open, engaging conversation with you to draw on the wealth of experience that both you and Andrew and our academic advisors bring to this program. And we really appreciate you giving us time. And we look forward to another date with you. Thank you. Have a good evening, everyone. Thank you, Andrew. And go well, everyone, and be strong with load shedding. We shall persevere.
Yes, we will. Thank you very much.
The University of Johannesburg, the future reimagined.